So a lot happens in this play in scenes 9 and 10, and I want you to make sure you watch the clips that follow this lecture because you really see a lot of what's at play and what I'm going to discuss occur in those two specifics, in those two clips from those two scenes. I want to continue this Blanche Stanley um, conflict as we have been the whole time, and just continue to point out some differences in their character and in what actually takes place here. So in scene 9, after Blanche and Mitch have a confrontation, and Mitch tells her that he knows what the truth about her past and Laurel and with the young boy, she does tell him that is right, and gives it basically a reason for that, or her explanation, her version of the explanation, that she says, after the death of Alan, and this is in scene 9, intimacies with strangers was all I seemed able to fill my empty heart with. I think it was panic, just panic, that drove me from one to another, hunting for some protection here and there in the most unlikely places, even at last in a 17-year-old boy. So, she sort of gives that sense it was a result of grief, of feeling panicked, of feeling alone, how to fill that void, that emptiness. But he goes on and says, you lied to me, Blanche. And she says, don't say that. And she said, but never inside. I didn't lie in my heart. And then before this admission, she says these very significant lines. I don't want realism. I want magic. Yes, yes, magic. I try to give that to people. I misrepresent things to them. I don't tell truth. I tell what ought to be truth. And if that is sinful, then let me be damned for it. So again, there's that sense of her imagination, that sense of her living in a different magical reality that isn't true, that isn't real, that isn't the brutishness of the world that is personified by Stanley, but this magical fantasy world where she is okay, where things are good, where everything is fine. And that's what she wants to create for herself. That's what she wants to create for the people around her. Now, this is in stark contrast to Stanley, who we have seen is practical to the extreme. That is very, very much against the Blanche idea of magic and of fantasy. He wants to be plain. He wants to call it like it is. He wants a world that is straightforward. And so in scene 10, we see Blanche spinning another fantasy about Shep Huntley, about how Shep is going to get her out of this situation. And Stanley calls her on that. He says, as a matter of fact, there wasn't no wire at all, meaning Shep Huntley did not wire anything to you about plans, about meeting up with him. He says there isn't a millionaire. Mitch didn't come back with roses because I know where he is. And he says there isn't a goddamn thing but imagination and lies and conceit and tricks. I've been on to you from the start. And so there we get in those two pieces of those two scenes the dichotomy that is Blanche and Stanley. The imagination, the fragile, the versus the reality, the magic versus the realism, as she says. I don't want realism. I don't want the world that Stanley represents. I want magic. I want the world as it ought to be. And so you get those two differences there, those two separate worldviews. You also get, as we talk about power, I want us to look at these next lines and what's happening in scene 10. So Blanche starts to get very nervous. She and Stanley are alone together. Stella is in the hospital having the baby, or about to have the baby, and Stanley, she starts feeling insecure and scary, and for some reason, now whether this is mental illness or whether this is really, if she's really fearful, I don't know. We can argue that, but she tries to get Western Union. She tries to get help, and she says, "Help me, caught in a trap, caught in." And then Stanley comes out and proceeds to rape her. He says, "We have had Tiger, drop the bottle top, drop it," as she's broken off a bottle to try to defend herself. "We've had this date with each other from the beginning." She moans, the bottle top falls, she sinks to her knees. He picks up her inert figure and carries her to the bed. And as we know, rape is not a crime of passion. It's a crime of hatred. It's a power struggle. It is a power relationship, one person exercising power and control over another. And so we clearly see that Blanche and all that she represents is overtaken and destroyed by Stanley in scenes 9 and in scenes 10. Now the question that arises is Blanche going crazy? And in scene 9, we get the sense that she might be. We know that she's been a nervous, anxious character throughout the play, someone that's not emotionally stable. And perhaps this whole situation with Mitch, Stanley finding out her truth, telling that truth, has pushed her over the edge. But in scene 9, we get the impression that she's hearing music in her head, because she says that she's talking with Mitch, that music again. And Mitch says, "What music?" And Blanche says, "The Vera Sivana, the polka tune they were playing when Alan wait." And then it's a distant revolver shot is heard, and Blanche seems relieved. There now the shot. It always stops after that. The polka music dies out again. Yes, now it's stopped. And Mitch says, "Are you boxed out of your mind?" Meaning, I didn't hear any music. What the heck are you talking about? And clearly we get this sense that maybe she's had some sort of PTSD moment, and that recurs often, where she hears the music and the gunshot of the night that Alan shot himself. So we get that hint there. And then in scene 10, when she is alone, and then Stanley does come back to the apartment, we know that we get this in the stage directions. Lurid reflections appear on the wall around Blanche. The shadows are of a grotesque and menacing form. She catches her breath, crosses to the phone, and jiggles the hook. Stanley goes into the bathroom and closes the door. And so these lurid reflections that appear on the wall around Blanche, again, is this another way of communicating that she is losing her mind, that she is losing touch with reality. And then Stanley rapes her at the end of scene 10. And then we'll kind of see with scene 11 what the result of that is.